Hello, everybody. I saw this good article on Russia today that I thought we can talk about. It's about how Russia managed to survive Western sanctions. In fact, a couple of days ago, I saw an article by Swedish television that admitted that Russia had prepared very well for these sanctions. And back in 2014, when Russia seized Crimea and the population there voted to become a part of the Russian Federation, Russia was slapped on by a bunch of sanctions, and it hit the Russian economy pretty hard. But the Russians learned from that, and that's one of the reasons they pretty much were pretty well prepared for this. In this article, they will go through a bunch of things. The fact that Russia, when the Europeans and the Americans threw all their sanctions on Russia, they redirected a lot of their energy sales to markets in Asia, like India, China, and Turkey, or Turkey. And the countries that were sanctioning Russia pretty much had to pay with rubles, right? And this stabilized, and in fact, for a moment, a period there, brought the value of the ruble to a pretty high degree, right? It was a very sought after currency. So I thought we can read this. So the Russian economy has managed to hold up against the massive sanctions imposed by Western countries and their allies over Moscow's military operation in Ukraine, White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby admitted on Friday. So as you can see, the Western establishment, or NATO stand, is admitting this themselves. As the conflict enters its second year, Washington revealed more anti-Russia penalties targeting dozens of companies and individuals linked to the country, and raising tariffs on Russian goods whose imports were still allowed. Meanwhile, the European Union approved its 10th package of sanctions against Russia, which includes export limitations on dual-use items and technology, measures against so-called Russian disinformation, and new restrictions against individuals and entities for their alleged support of the Russian military. Western allies Britain, Switzerland, Australia, Japan, and New Zealand joined the measures. We have gone through this before. All these sanctions are just hurting the Western economy, the European EU economies. It doesn't really hurt Russia that much. It was predicted that the Russian economy would contract with as much as what? Between 10 to 15%? It didn't. Secondly, Russia is a country with a lot of natural resources. They still have a lot of industry, which the neoliberal West pretty much, they outsource their industry to China, to Bangladesh, to, in the American case, to Mexico and Central America. And you have really not much of a manufacturing base here in the West. So, Russia's economy is showing some resilience, according to Kirby, who added, however, that it's not clear whether this can be sustained for the long haul. He has had to take some drastic measures to prop up his economy, to prop up his currency, including playing pretty aggressively with interest rates, for instance, Kirby said, commenting on steps approved by Russian Vladimir Putin. Now, this is where the Westerners get it wrong. Russia is in this for the long haul. This is a war of attrition. Russia, as I and many others have said before, is not only demilitarizing Ukraine, it's also demilitarizing NATO as we're speaking. We've gone through the articles before where a lot of Western media outlets are admitting that Russia is winning the ammunition war. Also, Russia, like we said, are well prepared for this economically. The Europeans, however, are not. They were so foolish enough to serve American interests that they have been pretty much silent on the destruction of Nord Stream 2, right? So, the Germans have allowed the Americans to destroy their economy. And that is just crazy to me, right? I mean, yeah, that's an emasculated nation, if you ask me. I hope Germany will step up and wise up, but there has been, a lot of anti-NATO demonstrations across Europe. Obviously, in the country I live in, Sweden, there's been dead silence. Swedes are some of the most Russophobic people you can find. But anyway, Russian statistics service Rosstat reported that GDP of the sanctions-hit nation contracted by just 2.1% in 2022, much less than the 10 to 15% some had predicted after sanctions hit last March. The Russian economy is actually forecast to increase by 0.3%. We talked about that in another video during the current year, according to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, which is a Western institution. The strength of the Russian economy has been partially attributed to global prices for oil and gas, which saw a dramatic surge shortly after one of the world's biggest exporters of the two commodities were targeted by Western sanctions. The growth of energy prices has reportedly compensated for the drop in the volume of the country's exports. At the same time, Russia managed to reorient some of its exports, including energy sales, eastwards after Western buyers opted to shun direct shipments under the sanctions pressure. The Russian national currency, the ruble, has also managed to stay afloat after bouncing back following a dramatic decline seen shortly after the sanctions were imposed last March. This has been attributed to strict capital controls, a dramatic interest rate hike by the Russian central bank, and the country's move to trade transactions with allied countries in domestic currencies. The share of the ruble in Russia's international settlements has doubled compared with December 2021. Last week, President Putin said that Moscow would continue to work with partners to form a stable and secure global payment system independent of the US dollar and of other Western currencies. The ruble strengthened further after Moscow introduced a new payment mechanism, this one is very important, from April 1st. This requires nations that impose sanctions on Russia to pay for natural gas in rubles. Yes, because as we know, Russia was sanctioned from the banking system and which means they can't use the SWIFT system, the messaging system, basically. President Putin has also attributed Russia's economic resilience to the country's strong agricultural sector. According to the latest data provided by Russia's statistics service, the harvest amounted to 153.8 million tons, a 26.7% increase year on year against 2021. By the end of the agricultural year, that is, by June 30th, 2023, we will be able to bring the total volume of grain exports to 55 to 60 million tons, he said last week during his annual address to the Federal Assembly. Meanwhile, parallel imports of non-sanctioned products and flourishing trade with countries that refrain from punishing Moscow had also contributed to the economic resilience. In addition, Russia has been successful in moving a lot of products to Asian markets such as India and China and to Turkey. Additionally, Russia also had several years to prepare for sanctions following its reunification with Crimea in 2014. Moscow succeeded in developing an alternative to SWIFT, the messaging network that underpins global financial transactions. This came in response to Western threats to cut the country off from the international banking system. The Russian authorities also created a national payment system called Mir as a domestic alternative to Visa and MasterCard. After Crimea-related sanctions were imposed, the Central Bank of Russia has issued some 150 million Mir cards since late 2015. Now, I was thinking that, what was I going to say? Yes, as you can see, Russia has prepared very well, but we spoke before the whole purpose of sanctions. The whole purpose of sanctions is to starve countries out. That is to make lives so miserable for the average citizen, so they will rise up against the leadership that the West opposes and pretty much overthrow them, right? This is what they have done in Iran, or trying to do in Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, you name it, Syria, and so forth. Zimbabwe, Eritrea. And as we can see, it's failing miserably. It's not working at all. And I think it speaks to the, sadistic nature of the Western elites on how far they are willing to go to reach their geopolitical goals and ends, basically. They want Russia to be like many other countries, but they want Russia to go back to the 1990s, where they just, privatized everything, and all the profits from natural resources and so forth went into the hands of a small oligarchy in Russia, as well as outside of Russia, Western oligarchs. Because remember, in Russia, there are oligarchs. In the West, they are entrepreneurs and free-thinking capitalists, right? So I refer to both of them as oligarchs, basically. So that's how they want Russia. They want Russia to be submissive. They want to partition it in 4 different time zones or countries or whatever. They want to chop it up, balkanize it, basically. They want to steal all its natural resources, and they could care less if the population starves, if the women are forced into prostitution and human trafficking, if the whole freaking state just collapses. They don't care. It's about keeping countries submissive, make sure that they don't outcompete you. And that's the issue they have with China. The Americans are mad, the Europeans are mad that China has surpassed them technologically, which is pretty fucking stupid to me, because Western economies outsourced all their industries to China because it's cheaper labor, okay? Now that the Chinese have managed to develop their own technology and educate people, far more people, into the fields of infrastructure, technology, and IT, and so forth, the Europeans are mad. How are you mad? You created a society, okay, which encourages, in particular, women, because Western women dominate universities in subjects such as political science, social work, psychology, humaniora, right? And what do they discuss there? Gender studies, basically, right? And we see the so-called Russian experts that we have in the Western political elite. They don't know jack about Russia. They underestimated Russia, okay? They think Russia is still 1991, okay? But you better wise up. Russia is not 1991 anymore. This is a different Russia, okay? It has a strong military, a strong leadership. They have a strong economy. I'm not saying Russia is perfect. Absolutely not. There's problems in Russia, 100%. But to have this, supremacist view of yourself and look down upon other nations like this, and with this faulty intel, I mean, Jesus Christ, this is laughable. How can you not know this? Anyway, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Please like and share and subscribe to the channel. hit the notification bell, and leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.